From my experience, it's like 64% or more of most of the websites we've worked on have sales from mobile. And that's really common, especially with the pandemic. One of the things that we do is try to stress page weight should be under 2 MB for every single page. And a lot of that reason is because anything that's over that is going to suffer dramatically in performance on a mobile device. Image lazy loading, that's something that we definitely apply for both desktop and mobile.
Welcome to the Winning Ecommerce Experience Show. And now your host, Shahram Anver.
Hey guys, today we have a senior optimization developer with Speed Booster, and they've single-handedly optimized hundreds of Shopify stores. Paul Barden, great to have you with us.
Thank you.
So this is going to be a little bit of a different interview to what we usually do with merchants. Like Paul's, I think, work hands-on with tons of stores, and he tells me that he also trains other people on how to look at performance. So I'm really excited to have you with us today.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very excited to be here.
And I was just looking at the artwork you sent me, and then we were just talking about the impact it's had on your beard. And I was just feeling a little jealous right now looking at it because I've always wanted to grow one.
Yeah, I'm single, so I have the time, and no one's really hounding me.
It's like whenever I look at this topic, it's one of those things which like I think almost every e-commerce merchant has read this statistic that Amazon said, where I can't remember exactly, but something like every second of load time that you have, you're losing X% of sales. It's one of those things which I think everybody just understands, that website speed has to be fast, but I think it's the devil is in the details kind of thing where people just don't really know where to start, right? Like, is that been your experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we do have a free tool, the Shopify Analyzer, on our website. And that is a good starting point for most people who, just like you say, don't really know what to do, don't know where to start. They know that their website speed is really slow. They know that they're getting knocked on all these tools, and they don't really understand, what's going on in the background. So that is one of the reasons we do that tool, and that's kind of one of the reasons that people come to us, is because they really just don't have any idea, and they'll try to go through, some tutorials on how to make your site faster, and it ends up messing things up. So, it's very common for Shopify owners.
Yeah, and I think it tends to be one of those scary topics too, because almost everything you read if I were to launch a blog on website optimization, it's full of so much jargon that if I don't know how to code, I'm going to end up being confused. And on the other point, I'm told that it's really important. And just like you said, the risk of messing up my quote unquote baby, the e-commerce site I've been putting my heart and soul into, that's a scary prospect, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that's honestly why we usually stress finding an expert first, just so they can kind of tell you what you can do by yourself. Little things like adding, image alt text and stuff like that. More complicated stuff tends to be easy to mess up. So we always advise to seek out an expert first, get a consultation, and then see what you're actually able to do afterwards.
Right. So typically with optimization, you have this concept of low-hanging fruit, right? Like you have like these little things that you can do that can just dramatically improve things, and get to maybe 60% of the way, and then I guess you've got the more complex stuff that can like push you a little bit more. What are those things? Obviously, it depends on from client to client, but what are the sort of those common gotchas that you see clients making mistakes-wise that can be fixed easily, relatively?
Yeah. They'll add lazy loading to their website a lot of times and think that they did it right, and they're very proud of it because it works, and they install JavaScript, and then they go and test it on a tool, and they see 48 images flagged that you should be lazy loading, and they're like, "I just installed it. What's going on?"
Mhm.
In the Shopify, development themes, they kind of leave like the regular image tag with the source attribute in place, and that's something that you don't want to do with lazy loading. That's something that you actually aim to change.
Tell us a
So a
little
lot
bit
of
about what is lazy loading for those of the visitor or the viewers who don't know. Maybe just
Yeah,
define that for us. That would be awesome.
yeah, absolutely. So normally when you go to a web page, you'll see all of the images kind of load up on the screen at once. What lazy loading does is it loads only those images that are necessary that the user is actually going to see. So, if you're the type of person to browse around, and only look at the top part of the page, the rest of the image content below the fold that doesn't actually, you don't actually see, none of that loads. So you have this perception of a faster site because things load as you need them versus all at once.
Mm.
And I think that's one of the really important things for people to have a consistent experience when they go to any page on your site. Lazy loading is something that ensures that every page loads pretty much the same assets that it needs, and it doesn't load all of the excess content like all of the images. As you browse around the site, those will pop up and start to load. But it does give the user a perception that the site is much faster.
Mhm.
And also for phones and anything that's going through an LTE connection, it does substantially drop the page weight, improves the page speed, and lessens the number of additional resources that you're loading. So that's one of the things that has the biggest impact to site speed, and that's a very common service that we deal with. Um, so whenever it's installed, a lot of the times we'll see what's called a low quality image placeholder, and
Mhm.
that's when you load a smaller image while the other one is lazy loading in, right?
Mhm.
It's kind of just a placeholder for the page. The challenge with these is that it effectively doubles the number of requests,
Mhm.
and just because an image is 300 pixels versus 600 pixels wide does not mean that it's 50% of the size. Sometimes it's 70% or 80% of the size, and it's a lot of it is based on color density, pixel density, and stuff like that. That's kind of going on behind the scenes, and so I think that's one of the really common problems I'll see with lazy loading is they'll go through, they'll install it, they think it works great, and then suddenly they realize that they're not doing it the right way because it's still getting flagged.
Got it. I mean, I've
Um,
got more questions for you on the lazy loading, but let's come back to it. But go on. Like, what are the other sort of those common mistakes that you've seen?
Shopify supports image scaling by default, so you can kind of do these really neat tricks with Liquid in the code. I see a lot of people try to upload a separate image for everything in every spot, and they try to have one image that's 200 pixels, one that's 1,000, one that's 14. And part of it is interesting because while most people think, yeah, it's oversized, I should scale this down. Shopify gives you a way to do that where you only need one image all the time for any place that image will appear on the site, and it'll always be able to appear, if you code it the right way, based on, the correct device width. So that's another really, really cool trick that I see a lot of people who aren't tech savvy will try to upload a lot of images in different places, and it's just not really necessary all the time.
Right. I mean, most of like you've essentially really honed in here on images, and I guess it's really coming from the place that if you want to improve your website speed, you just need to make it less heavy. And if you're going to make it less heavy, then pick the things that are have the most weight. And in this case, I guess there tend to be most 9 times out of 10 images.
Yeah, and honestly, I feel like that is for e-commerce one of those really little subtle nuances that you get with
Mm.
e-commerce that you might not have with any other website. A lot of business websites may only have 3 to 4 images on each page. An e-commerce website, you want to advertise probably 20 products on your homepage. E-commerce websites just have very complex needs, And even if a website is really fast, you get a new theme, it's testing in 2 seconds. You go and you add all of your images, and suddenly it's gone up to 15, and you don't understand why. And that is definitely a lot of why we place a focus on images.
Right. So does that mean videos are a complete no-no, or are there things that you can do with videos too?
Yeah, there's plenty of ways to, even if it's an embedded video, a YouTube video, something that's hosted externally, there's always a way to lazy load those.
So let's jump into lazy loading. I mean, I guess one of the pet peeves I usually have with some of these sort of, whenever you're reading sort of advice, it's so hard to explain things at a technical level to a point where people can make intelligent decisions around it, right? So, it's so easy to say lazy loading is awesome, and then, you have people going and trying to do lazy loading on everything. When I guess here it makes sense that you try to lazy load as much as you can, but would you say you shouldn't lazy load anything above the fold or even above the fold?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think above the fold content for me, I really like to. This is another thing you can do with Shopify, serving images in different formats.
Hmm,
Above the fold images, I think, don't need to be lazy loaded, even though
exactly.
they might get flagged on a tool. The user's perception of speed is just as important as that speed metric on, web page test or whatever.
Yeah.
So you really want to give the user that idea that this website loads instantly. The second that I type this web address in, the image content's there, everything is in place. Above the fold images, I like to do progressive JPEG for, and it's
Hmm.
just because it kind of enhances the way the image downloads. I think it's definitely a little bit faster. So that for me is definitely the different technique that I would apply to anything that's above the fold.
And tell us a little bit about progressive images for those of us who don't know about it. I mean, it's super easy to do, and it's something you could probably ask your designer to do. It's literally a checkbox on Photoshop, right? When you're exporting the image. But tell us what it means, so that people have a better idea what it is.
Yeah, so essentially, when a regular JPEG is going to download on the website, it's just going to try to download the entire image. Once the entire image file is ready, then it's going to toss that image onto the page. With progressive JPEG, it's going to download a smaller piece at a time, and then it's going to more slowly make that image appear. So a lot of sites I see have this little trick where it'll use a color for the background. It seems similar with progressive JPEG because you might only see a single color pop up first, and then you'll see the image slowly load in. So
Right.
it kind of allows you to view the content immediately and just allow it to download while it's kind of coming in.
So it really, in the end, it's all about the perception of speed, where you don't want to show someone this white screen or something that looks blocked, but like people need to be seeing activity.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the idea is for that above the fold content just to make sure that appears instantly. And, the user is usually okay with waiting for an image to finish downloading because it'll start
Right.
to look a little bit blurry and, but the problem comes in when they're trying to wait for the entire website to load at once. And that's really where the complex speed issues come in.
Right.
So yeah, user experience for me is definitely one of the really important factors in speed that gets missed a lot of times.
And user experience is very tricky. I remember reading this article about an airport. It was in the US, and I don't remember which airport it was, but apparently they got like many complaints. It was probably the number one complaint that people we didn't like having to wait for the baggage, and it was like they constantly complained about it. And then these guys brought in all these expensive consultants, and they did everything they could to make the baggage come faster, and they reduced it from something like 8 minutes to 7 minutes, which took them a lot of time and effort. And it's still, no matter how much they managed to reduce it, they still kept getting the same complaints. And then
Mhm.
they tried this other trick where they just made the walk from the airplane to the baggage counter even longer. So then essentially the time it needed to get the bags up was still the same, but people were
Yeah.
spending less time actually waiting for the bags, and suddenly they were miraculously happier. So it's almost like this illusion of something happening is very powerful and something not to be sort of ignored.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's funny because some tools don't take user experience into mind, and I definitely think that's one of the things as a company we really try to stress is that you're optimizing the right metrics and you're optimizing the right way to make sure that everybody along the way is happy. You're not just satisfying the tool, but making your users kind of less likely to use your site.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the happier they are, the more likely they are to come back, and we all know that it's much cheaper to have a return customer than making a new one because you're spending all
Yeah.
your ad dollars on them. Let's talk a little bit about mobile because you mentioned that briefly in terms of page weight, and especially with lazy loading, how it can be make a dramatic difference. We've been speaking to a lot of brands on this podcast, and I can't think of a single one that hasn't told me that mobile is important. It's some people are literally getting 80% of their sales from mobile. So, and I think one of the problems with mobile, at least for me, is that as founders we work on our computers, so most of the time we look at our site on our desktop and it feels like it's fine and it's right. So are there any sort of like advice that you have that's specific to mobile that you found works really well? I mean, we already talked about lazy loading, so but is there anything else that you find, or maybe you say that you should be more aggressive with lazy loading on mobile, but how do you think about that?
It's funny because you're totally right. From my experience, it's like 64% or more of most of the websites we've worked on have sales from mobile, and that's really common, especially with the pandemic. So one of the things that we do is try to stress page weight should be under 2 MB for every single page. And a lot of that reason is because anything that's over that is going to suffer dramatically in performance on a mobile device. Image lazy loading, that's something that we definitely apply for both desktop and mobile.
Mhm.
One of the things that is helpful for mobile are things like infinite scrolling on collections pages. It kind of reduces the amount of time the user spends navigating from page to page.
Right.
One of the things I do notice is that quick shops and a lot of themes tend to load the entire product page, mini product pages, and it'll do that for all 48, products on the grid. And so, a lot of times for select websites, we'll suggest turning features like that off, turning off swatches that, load a lot of excessive images and cause 404 errors. So there are a
Mm.
lot of issues like that we see on mobile that really helps. And then as far as like product pages and stuff like that, just enhancing small features like being able to use native swipe features, being able to zoom into images by pinching it. It seems like really silly things, but those are actually things outside of speed that really affect the user experience. And that's something that we definitely try to stress. Even being able to navigate around the page takes time, and
Mm.
having like a sticky add to cart button on mobile is super helpful because even though it's not making your site load faster, it's definitely speeding up the users flow throughout the website because they don't have to navigate around pages quite as much.
Right. I mean, listening to what you just said, essentially we're talking a lot about user experience there, right? Like, I mean, I guess what you're really arguing here is that on a mobile screen, the user experience is decidedly very different to what you would do on a desktop. So try to make that as easy as possible. I mean, I can imagine that having a sticky bar at the bottom with the cart and an add to cart button is very convenient because I don't need to go searching for that little cart icon on a nav bar. Um,
Yeah, and on desktop sites, those are usually going to appear above the fold. So
yeah.
it's just like you were saying, if you're used to testing it on your desktop, you'll go to this, and you won't even really think about it until you have somebody like me say, "Hey, you should add this, and here's why."
So how do you actually do this test with user experience? Like when you get a client on board, what are the steps that you take to, Because I mean, obviously, this suggests that you're actually having to go use their site and try to put yourself in the shoes of a real customer, right? Talk us through that step because I think it's probably something which more e-commerce founders should be doing with their site. I think most of us already do, but what's sort of that process you follow?
Well, it's funny. One of the things I noticed when I started this company that was different from Shopify owners are different from the traditional software developers in that there's not going to be a defined life cycle. There's not going to be well-defined requirements. And those are things that I think Shopify store owners are really missing. So coming in from a testing background, I think, testing as a live user, going through the site, making sure it's easy, things are easy to understand, product descriptions are very well and worded and concise. They have plenty of lists and content. They relate to the customer's lifestyle. There's just like little things like that that I try to go through every single page and touch on how a website can be improved and what items a user is really looking for. It can be everything from outdated copyrights in the footer to having a Christmas a promotion code inside of the footer by the email sign up, or just saying sign up and having not really having any content around your email sign up campaign. So there's things like that between the conversion analysis and the speed analysis. It's close to over 100 points that we touch on. So we basically start by the home page, navigate around, just kind of see what areas we can improve, and this is based on a checklist that we've developed from a few hundred websites that we've optimized.
If you like, we can jump into that screen share right now, and then we can walk through those points. I think it'll be easier to follow because this is really, really useful information.
So I'll go ahead.
So tell us a little bit about Crave Life before we start, so that people get a sense of what we're going to look like, what we're going to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. So Crave Life is a women's clothing store. They kind of focus on comfort and quality. And when they came to us, they had purchased our Entrepreneur Plus package. Basically, they came to us wanting a faster website and improved conversions. We start off by kind of offering them a free analysis of the website and kind of let them know exactly what they would expect from the optimization. We run speed tests with web page test, which offers live metrics, real devices and real networks, and also the Speed Booster Analyzer, which is kind of what I was saying. It's going to give you those main points. So the Entrepreneur Plus package that they had purchased kind of goes through those main analyzer points, a little bit of extra technical stuff, and that complete site analysis for conversion. They definitely had about a 9 to 15 second page load when they started. And then post optimization right now, currently they're down to 3.8 second load time, 5.5 when fully loaded. So they dropped between 7 and 10 seconds on most pages, which is substantial.
Huge.
Yeah. All right.
All right. So unfortunately, the screen share is disabled because Zoom's just upped their security settings. Sorry about that, Paul. Go ahead. You should be able to share it.
Okay. Yeah. So essentially the way we start off the project, we kind of run these tools, these tests, and kind of narrow down exactly what issues exist on what pages. And that kind of helps guide the optimization. It kind of gives us a checklist to follow while we're going through. And then, from there, we kind of just make notes on each page, what we're going to do. The cool thing about Shopify is that everything is template based. So if you are going to change, your product templates, you only have to make changes to the main templates once, and everything else after that is going to kind of follow suit, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Just because most websites, in a static website, you have to go through and change every single thing on every single page. Shopify just makes it really easy to do. So we'll do that. I normally start off with images because those are the biggest impact to speed. Most Shopify sites are 60% plus image content, and if they're all 2-3 megabytes a piece, it's just a massive speed issue. So we start by kind of going through compression
Paul, are
issues.
you sharing your screen right now? Because we don't see anything.
Okay, here we go. All right, so here we go.
Yes, perfect.
So this is Crave Life right now on our Shopify Analyzer. And as you can see, there are, a couple of issues that are remaining, but for the most part, we have, really good scores on everything. This is something that we supply to all of our clients when they start.
Mhm.
So we do before and after metrics, web page test, and then the speed booster analyzer. And this kind of just goes through, and it's an easy way for Shopify owners to follow along with the report and see what issues existed, what was here. So the page weight was about 5 megabytes for the home page alone. We had a few 100 requests here, lots of domains, which means that a lot of content on the site was hosted externally. A lot of image compression issues, large images that are hidden in different places by JavaScript or CSS. And then we have lazy loading, of course. So that's kind of a preview of that. And what we'll do is we will go through. Here we go. And let's see. So this is what an image tag looks like, essentially, just by itself. So first thing that we normally do is we will install script libraries. If that is usually starts with lazy loading. If they have something like infinite scrolling, we'll go ahead and just install everything. That way we know what to work with. And just to change this, we'll just add the class lazy load and change the source tag attribute to data source. And what that's going to do is that's going to tell the browser not to load this image until the lazy sizes library has picked it up and lazy loads it into the web page. That is literally how easy it is to add lazy loading. It's really simple, but there are a lot of times that people kind of just don't do it the right way, or will try to be really complex with it, and will end up messing things up.
Sure.
So if you can go to inspect on a web page, and you can kind of hover over it afterwards, and you want to see that it says lazy loaded. That's basically just the class saying lazy sizes did pick it up and it lazy loaded it in. And then if you go to the speed booster analyzer and you test the web page again, you can see the image isn't going to be flagged for lazy loading. That's really just how easy it is. A lot of times what I see is people will do something like this.
Keep the source tag as is.
Yeah, they'll leave this here, but they'll also add the other data source attribute. Now what this does is it makes the browser load this one, and then later on lazy loading picks the other one up and says, I'm going to load the second image in. A lot of times this will be a different size, so essentially you're doubling the number of image requests if you do this wrong, and your page will be much slower after the lazy loading has been added. So this, like I said, it's one of those subtle things that I see a lot, but it's definitely something that is a big issue. So normally I just recommend to kind of just leave it right like this, and 9 times out of 10 you don't need to do anything special. Lazy sizes does have some plugins to use for iOS and anything that strange that might happen. But for the most part, I don't even use a lot of them because Shopify does already support image scaling, and some of them just aren't really necessary.
Gotcha.
Mhm. All right. So let's see. So that is that. And then let's try to do something with the, let's go to customize theme. So a really easy way to do this for me is to just pick pretty much any image that you have on your website. This will be just a really basic kind of overview on how to, let's see, how to compress an image. So what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and save this in our downloads. And what I like to do is I usually like to use Crush Picks for anything that is on Shopify. It kind of automates the process and it just makes it really easy. For this demo, I'm just going to use Tiny PNG. It's a free service, and this is kind of how we walk through it on our blog. All you have to really do is drop the image in and see how much it compresses. This one saved 43%, right? So what we can do is we can go ahead and download this. And I'm going to go ahead and just re-upload it to Shopify with the same name. That way, we don't have to go through any code and switch anything out here. All we really have to do Okay, and so that's really all we have to do is just drop the file into here, let it compress, and then re-upload it.
Gotcha.
So that one is pretty easy, honestly. And then yeah, so another thing is image scaling. So normally a lot of times when you look at an image on desktop and an image on mobile is that, the image on mobile is going to be, you're going to want to have smaller. So if the device width is only 400 pixels, 300 pixels, you're going to want to make sure it's only scaled up to about 1.3 times the size. That way it doesn't look blurry on any Retina display devices or anything like that. What you don't want to do is use an image that is 1500 pixels and use the same image on mobile and desktop. So a really easy way to do that is to just kind of go through this image URL and let's see. Instead of using an attribute name, I can just use something like this. 500x. And what that is going to tell Shopify to do is serve this image in 500 pixels width. And there are ways to do this, like add a source set. So you can kind of go through and make sure that there is a different device width set to each individual image width. But for the most part, this is kind of all you really need to do is set the image URL to a certain width, and Shopify will automatically handle the rest.
So in this case, is it 500x or 500px?
For Shopify here, you're going to do 500x.
Okay, got it.
If you were doing something in CSS or adding the height in HTML, it would be pixels.
So what you've done there is you've told Shopify to make sure that the image is only 500 pixels wide, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm going to go back to this other one and I can kind of show you. So the URL here kind of says small. Shopify has like a few different things that it can do, thumbnails, so they do try to make it easy to scale images in a lot of different ways. But it'll basically change the image URL and it'll add that little piece, underscore 500x. And then that'll kind of just be the new image URL that redirects to that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it can do that for every single image that you have everywhere on your site. And I did mention progressive JPEGs. So, essentially the only thing you need to do to serve it in this is make sure your images are uploaded in JPEG format. And then you can just add this directly into the syntax, and Shopify will automatically serve that in progressive JPEG format as well. It can also do this with PNG, but it doesn't. Progressive JPEG doesn't support image transparency. So I generally tell people to try to only apply that for large banner images or any images that are already going to be in that format. Going from PNG to JPEG, you're going to lose a lot of quality. So if you have text or logos, the absolute last thing you want to do is convert those. So it's definitely something that I think you should be careful with, but for the most part, it is pretty helpful.
Yeah, I find that typically with PNG versus JPEG, if you've got anything in your image that's got like very sharp contrast or lines like text or logos, like you mentioned, you should just stick to PNG and try to optimize that. But like images go very well with JPEG. Like sharing an image as PNG is a huge waste of space. At least this is what I
Yes.
found.
Especially for photographs. I'd absolutely agree with you.
I mean, on this topic of formats, there's been a lot of chatter about Google's, when you run the website tests with Lighthouse or the Google developer tools, they tend to recommend using quote unquote newer web formats like WebP and JPEG 2000. Have you guys, get the similar questions from your clients, or like, what's your advice when when people ask you about that?
Yeah, it's pretty often actually. There are a lot of like ImageKit. There are a lot of image hosting services that do kind of offer stuff like that. And then Shopify does for like Shopify Plus stores allow images to be like served in WebP format kind of automatically. So there are options out there, but I think for the most part, if you aren't a Shopify Plus member and you want a really good speed boost, progressive JPEG is going to be something that is a newer format that isn't going to be flagged in those tools, and it'll also give you the speed boost. So it's a cheaper way of achieving a similar goal.
Right.
I haven't noticed a lot of size difference as far as progressive JPEG and WebP. They're usually a little bit smaller on WebP, but I haven't noticed anything that's drastic like PNG to JPEG.
Gotcha. I mean, and I think the other dangerous thing with WebP is that it's a Google specific recommendation. I don't think Apple supports WebP. So if you are going to go with WebP, then, for the people on iPhones and Macs using Safari, you still need a fallback JPEG option because only Chrome would render it. I think Firefox does, but I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a really good point. And honestly, I think it's something because they want to appease the Google gods. They want everything in Search Console to be perfect. Everybody else, I totally agree. I think since you do have to have that fallback there, that it is sure to do something like progressive JPEG.
Gotcha.
Because I like to thing that is overly complex probably has corners that can be cut. It probably has things that are unnecessary, and the easier it is to maintain in the long run.
Paul, this has been very, very helpful. Thank you for your time. Is there any sort of parting advice or thoughts that you have, and let people know how to? Everyone wants to make their sites faster.
Yeah. Offer a free Shopify Analyzer tool on our site, analyze.speedbooster.com. Blog posts that kind of go through things that you and I just talked about, and even more stuff with how to do things like resource for conversion. So we do offer a lot of free tools on our website. I definitely would recommend checking out.
Awesome. I mean, I think we can. I'd be very happy to even just recommend your tool to these messages from Shopify stores who send me sort of reports from GG metrics and everything like that. It's like taking a little bit more nuance for Shopify specific use cases, because one of the things I think that is necessarily bad You just need to know whether that thing being read is actually not, right? Like if you had an error saying, hey, like this image should be lazy loaded, but you know for sure, you can rest easy that it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just, being able to test and have like that general idea of where important.
Perfect. Paul, thanks so much.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.